Hello, this is Mad Cat, the angry egalitarian that discusses this and that. Today we're doing part 3 of our series on the men's rights survey and non-feminist women. And I'm joined with special guest today, Zarius. And remember, feminists only seem to talk in numbers. Let's give them a big number they can't swallow. So, if you've been watching my series, we've been discussing a men's rights survey, which so far has over 400 respondents, which is amazing because when I first started this, it had barely 100. So we're at 429 at this time, and we're going to be discussing the next section, which is an importance question. Today, I am joined by Zarius. Hello, Zarius.
Hello there.
And can you go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself?
Well, my name on YouTube is BASSFZz. Make lots of different videos, mostly criticizing society and feminism as a whole, and talking about women and talking about how we're different and that's perfectly fine and all that. Usually I'm pretty snarky and like to add lots of comedy into my videos, so they're easy to digest because they can be pretty long sometimes. So it's pretty much what I do. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we're not too long on this one today, although I have a very bad habit of doing that. So let's go ahead and get started. I've tried to group these up a little bit to make them easier to go through, but we'll be jumping around a lot since they're not really in a particular order. So let's get the screen share going. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, let me click on my name so you'll get a better view. Okay,
I can
so
see it.
as mentioned, we've got 429 responses. Now, just take a quick look at the gender and sex. We've got 216 females who have taken this and 205 males, although 215 of those identify as a male gender. So still very close as far as male and females go, but again, I kind of prefer more females take this since everyone believes that those within the men's rights movement is just men who hate women. So let's go ahead and jump down to our section today, which is a little bit down. So there we go. As mentioned, this is a importance survey. The section is importance, 0 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. Now, I've divided this up. Oh, sure. Hold on one moment. There we go. Okay, so I've divided this up just to make this easier to go over. First off, 0, 1, 2 basically represents the not really all that important. 3 and 4 represent somewhat not important. 5 is, I don't know. 6 and 7, somewhat important. 8, 9, and 10, very important. So the first section that we're going to look at today is death. The first one is the one before us right now. How important is the male suicide rate for you? 76% rated it being very important, with 17% being somewhat important. Now, the second one we're going to report in this section is here. How important is the labor death gap rate to you? Which I assume that it's talking about the rate of men dying in the workforce. 42% stated that it is very important. 32% is somewhat important, and about 17% was, I don't know. So I'll turn this over to Zarius. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm actually kind of glad that a lot of people do think male suicide is a very important issue. Now, personally, I think suicide in and of itself isn't an issue that should be addressed, but I do think it has to be handled differently between men and women because we are different and we handle things differently. But I'm a little happy to see the respondents do find that to be an important issue that needs to be discussed. So I'm really glad. So far, there's only a couple of people who don't care, and I think that is a very positive thing. Um, how important is labor death gap? We see a lot of people do think it's important. Not as important as most people, I do think, and there's out to people who aren't different to it. So I don't know. I think those are pretty good results. It shows some people who took the survey do find it to be an important thing to talk about.
Well, my one thought here with how important is the labor death gap to you, I would presume that people don't really understand what that means offhand because I've never heard it listed as labor death gap. But the fact that I think it's like 95% of all workplace accidents are men.
Yeah,
And I mean, it comes with the territory. You do a dangerous job, there's a potential chance that you're going to die. But feminists really seem to ignore this when they talk about the wage gap issue of, oh, men get paid more. It's like, well, we often do jobs that there's a greater risk of death involved.
this
I
is
mean,
true.
shouldn't we be paid more money for doing something that they're not willing to do?
Well, one thing you have to take into account is feminists, for starters, they don't care about men, and second, they're really more focused on power. And so these high dangerous jobs, they don't really offer status or power. Like if you listen to them talk, it's always about men run all these different corporate jobs or men own these media companies, but they of course they'll never touch how men are mostly garbage collectors or men are mostly working in coal mines because they don't care. It's always about power. It's always been about power for these people. So you can't really expect them at this point to even touch it. To even think about that logically because they don't care. It's about power. So really, you're going to have to talk to people who are genuinely for equality to talk about this issue because feminists, again, at the end of the day, they don't care. If they did care, it wouldn't they would never attack MRAs or they'd never be upset if someone should bring it up or and offer up the very reasonable solution. The more dangerous jobs or the less people that want to do a job, more than likely it's going to be paid more. And
All right. So, not a whole lot to say on that section there, but yeah, I agree that it's very good that people are taking the issue of male suicide rate seriously, as men are, like, I believe, 5 times more likely to commit suicide than women. Let's go ahead and move on to our next section, which is abuse against men. So, the first one we've got is how important is men defending themselves against female abusers to you? Now, 83% state that this is very important, with 12% saying somewhat important. The next one is how important is the development of male victim shelters to you? Now, 78% said that this was very important, 15% said somewhat important. And then our last one is going to be how important are the rights of men accused of sex crimes to you? 76% said very important, 15% said somewhat important. Now, I include this last one as far as sex crimes. There are men who do commit sex crimes, but they still do deserve rights. But oftentimes, men are accused of committing a sex crime that they didn't actually commit, and their whole lives are destroyed because of it. Oftentimes, because a woman wants to hurt another man, so I consider this an abuse against men. But even then, with those who are actually guilty, they still deserve rights, but the laws are written in such a way that they basically get little to none. What are your thoughts, Darius?
I say you're completely right there. That basically at this point it's become guilty until proven innocent for a lot of young men. Uh, with the idea of listen and believe, with feminists and a lot of women propagating that incredibly idea, a lot of people are going to become the victims of false rape allegations and become the victim of crimes they didn't commit because it's just way too much power to put into the hands of someone to say that simply because I mean and actually at this point it's just become if you again I think earlier before we even go online that you can revoke consent at this point. At this point you can say I don't really I didn't like it at the time or I wasn't feeling like it, he begged me and that was rape. And unfortunately, no one ever thinks about how to separate issues like this. And I'd like to stop for a second and explain. One interesting thing is the fact that for every other crime, we have different types of like not standards. Well, different types of standards, but different type of degrees. That's what I was looking for. But for some odd reason, when it comes to rape, rape is rape. It's the same exact thing for every case, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me that we can have manslaughter and premeditated murder, or second degree murder. We can separate what happens when you kill someone. Someone is dead, no matter what. I mean, if it's manslaughter or murder, someone's still dead. But there are different degrees to it, and yet for some odd reason, we treat all rape cases even the ones where the woman has revoked consent, days after the act has been done, as the same thing. So I say absolutely, I'm glad more people do care about this because it has gotten to this point where you can just say I wasn't feeling like, or just in the middle of having sex, just like I don't want it anymore, and that would be rape by definition, unfortunately, and that's why there should be a lot more of an effort to either create degrees to rape or at least to separate consent or to make consent more concrete. Because then the next question is how do you even prove consent occurred? Because it just devolves into he said, she said. I mean, you can say, well, she said she wanted to have sex. She never said she didn't. The whole time she was kissing me. I mean, how can she say she revoked consent when she was responding and I kept asking her yes and she kept saying yes? At what point did she revoke consent? And then the man can simply say, well, I mean, I wasn't feeling it either. I kept going even though I wanted to stop. So technically she raped me. I mean, how do you prove that consent actually occurred in these different types of situations? So I think it's a huge minutia there, and it needs to be more concrete. That's the way I see it. But as far as the survey results go, I'm really glad more people do find it. That's a very important thing here when it comes to sex crimes, because too many young men are being accused of things they haven't done. That's what I have to say about that.
I once spoke to a feminist friend of mine about this issue when the idea of yes means yes consent laws were being introduced. And I was saying to her that I think that this is a ridiculous law. And she's like, well, women are afraid to say no to a man when it comes to sex. And I thought about that, and it's like, well, if a woman is afraid to say no when said, do you want to have sex, and she feels she can't say no, then what's going to stop her from lying and say yes? I mean, if I ask a woman, do you want to have sex, and she doesn't want to have sex, but she's afraid to tell me to that she doesn't want to have sex, and she says yes, that's technically still rape, even though she gave consent. So yes means
Yeah,
yes, and in fact, no means no is not really that effective of a mandate. I mean, I understand no means no more than yes means yes, but still, the way the legal system seems to favor women, it doesn't matter whether you get consent or not. If a woman, decides that she didn't like it or she has a personal beef with you, she can claim rape.
yeah, that's true. Um, yeah, I don't know. That really just doesn't make any sense to me, though. I mean, you're gonna tell me that she said yes because she was scared. Well, I mean, but she still said yes. So how are you supposed to ever know 100% that the woman wants to have sex with you when you can just straight up lie and say, well, I mean, I only said that because I didn't think you was gonna take no. I mean, there really is no defense for that. Honestly, I mean, technically speaking, like yeah, that's if the legal system accepts that as rape, then that's rape, and there's no real defense for that. I mean, it's her word becomes law at that point. There's no defense, and that's a really scary thing when it comes to the court system.
And, you know, the flip side to all of this is false rape accusations. I mean, we have Emma Zokowitz, or whatever the fuck her name is, carrying around a
Yeah,
mattress around campus, even when it was proved that she lied about it, that she still tried to engage in sexual acts after the supposed rape happened. And yet she is, you know, honored by even Senate of saying, oh, yeah, you're fighting the good fight. And she just released a porno, if you can even call it that, about her rape. And it's like she's getting rewarded for a false rape accusation where the man's life was turned upside down because of her accusation.
yeah,
Honestly,
exactly.
this is a crime that she committed, that she's not being prosecuted for.
Yeah, that's the danger of listen and believe. I mean, you can prove without a shadow of a doubt it didn't happen, and then you can show that you tried afterwards, which makes no real sense to me. I remember someone actually sent me a video that I made some footage to do some commentary on, where a woman was being lambasted. Well, not lambasted. That's too strong a word. But people were arguing against her. I think her name was Kathy Young, if I am correct, where she was saying, well, she was commenting on what happened with Emma and the Facebook messages she sent to the man after the supposed rape. And she's like, I mean, this looked really friendly. How are you going to say, here, this is how a rape victim acts after she's been raped, that she tries to continue to contact her rapist and, have a good time and talk to him? And like one woman tried to defend that by saying, well, I mean, they work in the same social group, so that's why she was afraid to, to cut off communications. And I sat there and I was like, well, I mean, get out of here. That's BS. That's stupid. And there's no way a woman's going to get raped and then, she's just going to try to continue to be that person's friend and be friendly with that person. And then all of a sudden, for no reason, turn around and say, yeah, you know what, let me carry this mattress around and prove that he's a rapist. That just, it doesn't hold water. It makes zero logical sense. So I don't know, but I think I tell that story to show that women will stand by. They're feminists and they'll stand by it. In face of evidence, you can have all the evidence in the world, and they still won't take it. It doesn't matter to these people. They still will not take it, even if you show without a shadow of a doubt it did not occur. So I mean, it's a good thing they're not on the jury because there is no defense against rape at that point.
Well, the positive thing in all of this is that fewer and fewer people are claiming to be feminists. And even in this survey, I believe it gets less than 10% of the respondents being feminist. So,
Yeah,
the one nice thing is that when it comes to jury selection, there's a greater chance that a person is not feminist, but the flip side to that though is that people still feel that a woman needs protection whether they're feminist or not,
that's true.
so it's good but not so good. Okay, and then the other issues about male victim shelters and defending against a female abuser. The first one, the female abusers, I mean, a man should be able to defend themselves, but unfortunately we live in a culture that if a woman even touches a woman, he can go to jail. But a woman is allowed to hurt a man and suffer no consequence for it.
Yeah, that's true. There's a prank video that I used in another video I made that really shows this clear as day. And the interesting thing is, can watch a man get the crap beat out of him, and they won't do anything about it. But if he even, like, after watching him get beat up by a woman, if he responds or if he reacts, then a bunch of people come out of nowhere to go fight him. It's a crazy phenomenon that, and the thing about it, I think I understand why it is, and I guess I don't know what buzzword a feminist would use to describe this, but it would make sense that if you work on the presupposition, which is pretty much a fact, that men are stronger than women, a lot of people will see a woman fighting a man as an underdog story, like she's standing up for herself. But if we see a man fighting a woman, well, then we're gonna realize he's obviously has much more physical power than she does, and there's no real contest between most men and most women in terms of physical strength. Like, I mean, you might have the outliers with some women who might be able to handle men, but on average, there's you just can't do it. So I think a lot of people, understand that instinctually that there's no real contest between a man and a woman, and so that's why people feel justified in protecting a woman against the man because he just can't do it. Excuse me. But at the same time, without any analysis of the situation that led up to that, we don't know if the woman is just crazy. She just lost her mind and is just beating them up. So that's why I personally don't. I understand the desire to protect women because it's not a fair fight. But at the same time, I mean, you don't know what happened. She really could be an aggressor. She really could be abusing this man. And if no one wants to help him out, then he just has to suffer in silence.
Well, the general consensus is between men and women is that when a man is hurting a woman, he is basically the abuser. He is doing something really bad. However, when a woman abuses a man, she is justified that most likely the man has done something to warrant this. And it's
Yeah,
never
exactly.
given the possibility that the man may actually be a victim. In either scenario, the woman is always the victim, no matter which person is the aggressor.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the trouble comes from. And admittedly, I'm going to be completely honest. Man or woman, if I see one person hitting the other, my first thoughts kind of be, what did that person do in order to get them that mad? That's why I think there should always be some critical analysis of these situations. Like, we should ask, well, what happened? It really shouldn't matter if it's a man or a woman. We should stop and analyze the situation. And if the man is just being an abuser, we'll take him to jail. If it's the woman and she's beating up a guy because, I don't know, he cheated on her or anything like that, well, break him up, and take her to jail because cheating or not, no one deserves to get beaten, in the middle of the street or get beaten at home. So,
Well, my
I,
advice to anyone, any man that's being abused by a female, get video evidence of it. Pull out your phone, whether you're witnessing it happening or it's happening to you. Pull out your phone and turn the video recorder on and get evidence of it happening. Because even
yeah,
if you
absolutely.
call up after the fact and say, I was abused, you're still more likely to get arrested than she is. Only with video
That's true.
evidence will the police possibly believe you were abused.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that advice.
All right, so let's go
Uh,
ahead. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, we're done.
I'm going to move on to paternity rights. So we've got about 4 things to discuss in this one. The first one is, let me get back up to it. How important is sperm liability to you? Most likely, what kind of liability do you have to your own sperm? 36% said that this was very important. 26% said that this was somewhat important. 23% is kind of in the middle. Next one is how important are custody rights of men to you? 77% said that this was very important. 17% said this was somewhat important. The third one we're doing is how important is the expansion of male birth control options to you? At present, men really don't have anything beyond a condom, which can be poked holes into or used. And this kind of goes in with sperm liability as well, that some men will throw away their condom and women will fish it out of the trash and still use their sperm. 58% state that this is very important, while 26% say this is somewhat important. And then our last one will be how important is paternity fraud to you? 66% say that this is very important, 21% is somewhat important. Where do you stand on all of this, Zarius?
I'm gonna actually scroll forward. Like, let's move back to the top, the very first one, and we'll start from the top and move down. So it goes, how important is sperm liability to you? That's interesting that there's a lot of people in the middle ground. I kind of expect a lot more people to care about that because of all the other issues that kind of are linked to. I don't know. I'm a little shocked that there aren't very many people who say this is incredibly important. The fact that a woman can take my sperm and have my children, if even if I say I don't want any. I mean, evidently the whole point of wearing a condom was so she doesn't get pregnant. So you would think that more people would care about the fact that people can take your sperm and have children with that. But I don't know. I find that to be a little strange. What's the next one?
Well, as far as this issue goes here, some of the things that I've found in talking to other feminists is they're not really aware that this is an issue. And when I mention it, they're like, oh, it can't happen that much. You know, this must not really be a thing. And I can show them like 5 articles offhand of where this actually becomes an issue. And they're usually pretty surprised. So my thought of this being a little bit on the low side is people don't really realize how big of an issue this is.
All right, that would make sense. I would.
Yeah. So the next one is the custody rights of men.
Yeah, so I think it makes sense. A lot more people thought that that was an important issue. Um, it doesn't really look like too many people were indifferent to it, so that's great. I think it's a very important issue. The fact that the woman has to probably like be strung out on crack for a man to get his custody is a crazy thing to me. You know, of course that's a hyperbole, but I mean hyperbole, but even still, I mean, a woman has to be a pretty terrible mom for the family courts to say that the man should become the primary caregiver of the child. And I think it's really biased towards women. I don't think the courts ever take a objective look and see, you know, which one would the child be better being raised by. And I think too many men lose out because of that.
Yeah,
What are your
really
thoughts?
nothing more to be said to that. I think you kind of hit the head on that one. And yeah, pretty much is biased against men, and women have to be really, really, really horrible in order for a man to even be possibly considered as a primary caregiver. Okay, and then the third one, the expansion of male birth control.
Yeah, I'm going to be completely honest. I have no idea how a male pill would work. I don't know how they would stop the production of semen. In terms of the science there, I don't know. They could be working on it. I don't know. But
There has been suggestions in the past that pharmaceutical companies have worked on it, but have never released it because they don't believe that there really is a market for it. And feminists tend not to like this idea because they don't want to put the responsibility of birth control in the hands of men.
how ironic. How ironic is that? So I guess in my mind, unless I mean someone can definitely show me the science, but I don't know how it would work. But theoretically, if it does work and it does prevent, you know, sperm creation, I think men should definitely have that option if they don't want to have children. Because I mean, a vasectomy, I mean, you're gonna have to get a procedure, and you can't wait that out. I mean, it's either you go in there, you get the procedure done, and then you know, if you want children, you have to go back in there and get it fixed or get whatever happens removed. So I think it's way too much to get a vasectomy. You know, if you want to change your mind on having kids in the future, as opposed to a birth control. You know, say you have to wait like a month after you stop taking them, then you can you're good to go. Condoms can of course break, and then we just talked about sperm jacking. So I think it's very important for men to be able to have an option to say I don't want to have children. I don't think that should solely be in the hands of women. I don't really see why it would be solely in the hands of women, considering the fact that it takes two to make a child anyway. So, but and the thing that I find very interesting is the fact that you'll have feminists or you'll have, women say, there shouldn't be a male birth control pill because, men should be responsible. I mean, what kind of logic does that even make? I mean, both people would be responsible. I mean, if you can imagine men, taking birth control, women taking birth control, I mean, there you go. You pretty much have like a 198% guarantee you're not going to get pregnant. I mean, how could you be against that? If your objection is that you don't want to get pregnant, then you would think that you would help men with that condition as well. So I understand. I personally, I do think there should be more male birth control options, or at the very least, women should be, I mean, more cognizant of their birth control if they don't want to get pregnant.
Well, I think the reason why feminists have a problem with it is basically having a child is a weapon against men. And I say that because if a woman has a child, she has options of whether or not to keep the child, which means she can get an abortion, she can give it up for adoption, she can keep the child herself and not have the man involved. The only option a man has, he has three options. He can pay for the child, he can pay for the child, or he can pay for the child.
That's really, he can't, that's pretty much it.
I mean, that's really his only option. And if the woman decides to give it up for adoption, he has no say in the matter. So his own child can be kidnapped from him and he cannot say anything about it. It's a very scary
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. That's what I'm saying. I mean, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. That is a bit of a weapon to some of these women and feminists.
And the last one is, how important is paternity fraud to you?
I think personally, I think that's one of the most, to me, one of the most important issues I have. I don't even understand. And the thing that I find interesting is how you'll have women who can lie through their teeth for years about you being the father of their kid, and it'll never bother them. I mean, some women they can do it. I don't know, man. I think that's very important. I find that very close to being unforgivable that you can do that to both the child and his dad too. Because I mean, let's not forget the kid doesn't know who his real father is, and the real father could want to be a part of that kid's life. And the guy that's already there, maybe he has his autonomy taken from him because he thinks he's taking care of his responsibility, and it's not actually his responsibility. So you got three people in that scenario who are being affected by this. And I don't know how come a lot of people. Well, I'm glad some people do think it's a very important thing because it is. The fact that you have the real father out yonder, you have the guy who's there who doesn't even know, and then you have the child who is confused on who his dad is, or he doesn't even know what's going on. So I think that's a very important issue that I don't know, and I find it very funny how a lot of women can really summon some self-righteous indignation whenever a man asks for a DNA test. I mean, like you can be like light-skinned guy and it's dark, and you'll say, I don't know, man, I'm a little worried. Let's check this out, and the woman will just fly off the handle and be like offended that they'll even ask, which I don't really think some of them should be, especially if they know that they have been, cheating on their husband. I mean, their boyfriend. So I mean, long story short, I think it's a very important issue that should be discussed more often.
Well, the
Uh,
situation is a little bit worse than that, even in that, in
it,
places like California and I believe Connecticut and Ohio is like this, that a woman, she can name any man she wants as the child's father. And then the Department of DES is what it's called in Arizona. I don't know where it's called everywhere else. But Department of Economic Security will send out a letter to this man and say, you've been named the father. You have 30 days from the date of this letter to get a paternity test. Now, the state will pay for the paternity test. But if you don't get it within that 30 days, then even if you can prove after the fact that you're not the father, you are by law required to provide for that child. Now,
yeah,
what happens if it gets lost in the mail? You know, the thing with this, and there's other cases where, it was like a man, paid for child support for a child and then learned once the child became an adult that he was not the father of that child and went to the courts and said, I want a refund for all the child support payments that I made for this child. And they said no. So he had to pay for a child that was not his and is not allowed to get compensated for that. Because as far as the court system is concerned, that there's a difference between being a sperm donor and being a father. And if you're in a child's life, even if you're required not to be, you're still financially responsible. And the actual father is not.
yeah, that's cool. That's a crock of bullshit. Um, so you're right. I don't know. I think it certainly should be a much more important issue if that's the case over in California. That you can get a child pinned on you. I mean, only have sex with a woman once. I mean, according to this, I mean, maybe not even have sex with a woman at all, and still be painted as the kid's dad. And
Yep.
there's no real way to fight against that. And
not even if you get a paternity test after the fact to prove that you're not the father, you can still be labeled as the father.
exactly,
And
the
this
real
is
dad.
a big corruption within the system because it's really, well, we need someone to be the father to be financially responsible. So you're it. Because we don't want to pay for the child. You have to. Okay, so let's
Yeah.
move on to our next section, which is male representation in society. The first one is going to be how important is the sexualization of men in popular culture to you? Now, this one was a little bit all over the place, and we'll deal with this one by itself and then look at the next three together. But 25% said that this wasn't important. 23% said this was somewhat important. 19% was kind of eh. 18% said that this was very important. And 16% said not really that important. So these results are kind of all over the place. But what's your opinion of the sexualization of men in popular culture?
Um, Personally, I probably lean more on the not so important side, particularly because I don't really see anything wrong with women wanting to have sex with men or men being used as objects to be desired. I don't see a problem with that for vice versa with women. So I mean, if they're using sexy men to sell a product, I mean, if you're an adult, you have the mental cognitive skills to say, "Nah, I don't want the product." I mean, it doesn't really matter how sexy they show a man or how naked he is. I mean, you can still have the mental cognition to say, "I don't want your product. Your product doesn't work for me. I don't need it." So it really doesn't matter all too much if people are too sexual. I think the only problem there would, I guess, be for selling stuff to younger children, or I mean, they should be sexualized. But if we're going to go on adults, that's perfectly fine. So I don't really see it as a really big issue. And I don't know, being thought of as an object of desire doesn't sound like a bad thing to me. So
And, in truth, it's not. I mean, that's just how our biology is wired, that we do see each other as being, either competition or being objects that we desire. But, that's only our lower brain functions. Our higher brain functions allow us to see much more than that. So it's just really a combination of how we see each other sexually, how we see each other personally, and how we see each other socially. But
yeah,
I guess
go
I'm
ahead.
kind of on the fence about where I stand on the sexualization of men in popular culture, but only for the instant of how feminists really argue this issue. That it's like, oh, it's so bad that women are sexualizing culture, but men, it's just their power fantasy, you know? And it's like, that's such bullshit when I hear it, because you know what? I don't want to be a big muscle bound kind of guy. I'm perfectly happy where I'm at. Maybe I want a few extra muscles, but you know what? That's not really a power fantasy to be this big hulking mass, because, one, all of that's going to turn to fat the moment I stop working out. But two, I don't need that to be happy in my life.
Yeah, it's just blatant hypocrisy there. And really, it's very interesting how they can say, for men, it doesn't matter if men see sexualized images of men. That's all right. It doesn't matter. But for women, if they see sexualized images, I mean, it kind of spits in the face of their ideology that men and women are the same, with such a blatant difference between the two of them and how they view each other. So, I mean, that's one example of how an idea just cannot even coexist within a feminist mindset. But
Well,
I think that another thing, I'll go ahead.
there was a good example of this about a year ago where we started having this problem of people hacking into the phones of celebrities and releasing their private pictures out to the public. And when this first
Yep.
happened, it happened to a male. And people laughed at this guy. It's like, ha ha ha, you got naked pictures of you on the internet. You know, feminists were laughing at this. But the moment it happened to a woman, it was one of the worst things you could possibly do to someone, is to release their private pictures on the internet. The moment it happened to a woman, it was wrong. When it happened to a man, it was the funniest things. And that's the hypocrisy that I'm going after. I mean, if
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
wrong for one, it's wrong for the other. If it's right for one, it's right for the other.
Yeah, I agree with you completely there. And I mean, going off of that example you just posted, I think again it kind of really shows just how different men and women handle situations like this. Because I saw a video like 2 days ago where they were talking about different celebrity nude scandals and whatnot, and all the guys who had their pictures released, every single one of them kind of reacted the same way. They were like, "All right, that was me. I did it." There's this one. I think his name is like Dylan Sprouse. He's on like Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. He was like, yeah, he was making jokes about it himself. He was laughing about it. But whenever that happens to women, you'll see a lot of women. They'll either straight up lie and be like they're fake, or they'll be like, well, those are pictures from my husband, and anyone who looks at them is sexist and all that. So you see, women definitely value themselves a hell of a lot more than these men do. They definitely think it's a gross invasion of privacy, because I think a lot of people in general value female sexuality a lot more than male sexuality, which is why I even think it could explain why the results in the survey are all over the place, because more people do value a lot of the sex appeal women have than the sex appeal men have. I kind of have a theory on why, but I mean it's not really super relevant here.
Okay, and
Yeah.
before we move on to our next question, I'm going to take a comment from the chat. My friend Cyril Lefemme. One small problem that you're missing is that feminists see rights as a zero-sum game. So if men get rights, they see it as rights being taken away from women. That's actually a very true statement. What do you think about that, Z?
I think that's a very smart commenter there. Thanks for being here. But yeah, you're right. I never even thought about that. Yeah, you're right. I've never even thought about feminist view rights as just some zero sum game. It's one or the other. You do have a point there.
Okay, so let's move on to our other points of male representation in society. The next is, how important is the representation of men and boys in popular culture to you? 31%. Oh, this was about tied, but it was a difference of a few percentage points. 31% say that it's somewhat important. 31% said that it was very important. The next one is, how important is the graduation rate of men to you, which is on the decline? 55% said that it is very important. 26% said that it was somewhat important. And then the last one is, how important is the diagnosis of ADD in young boys to you? 43% said that this was very important. 29% said this is somewhat important. Now, before I give it over to Zarius, the reason why I put graduation rate and ADD in male representation in society is, for ADD, anytime a boy acts up in any way, it's assumed that they have attention deficit disorder and are immediately put onto drugs, which is a very big issue because a lot of people are getting misdiagnosed. A lot of children are. They're getting misdiagnosed for an issue and for just being a boy. This is what boys do. They're rowdy. They're kind of all over the place. They have a lot of energy. They need a lot of physical activity to calm down. And they're being told, you're behaving incorrectly. You're going to be put on drugs so we can control your behavior. And also the graduation rate of men, not just from college, but also from high school. Men and boys, well, boys are more likely to be expelled from school, which affects their ability to graduate. And also in college, less men are being accepted to go to school. And especially now with this rape hysteria, men are more likely to be expelled from college because there's the suggestion that they may have raped someone, since it's only a 50.00001% chance that if you did it, if you could have possibly done it, you're expelled. And this is a representation in society because no one really cares about these things. So let me give it over to you, Zarius.
Yeah, starting from the top. Uh, how important is boys? I think it's very important that we have more. I think personally more encouraging stories for young men and boys to learn how to be masculine. Because I think one thing I was thinking about, and I'm gonna make a video about this one of these days, is about there's a lot of anime like Japanese cartoons that I think really show good examples of masculinity and what it really means to be a good man that we don't really get a lot here in America. At least I don't really see a lot of American cartoons producing or a lot of shows producing that. But I think it's very important that in popular culture that we have more images of good men or positive role models. Not necessarily because men are like women and they're going to expect or think that they have to be that way. But I think it'll be a little more important to have more good stories, more stories with better role models, better morals, and I think just better overall content. I think would be a really good thing for our society as a whole because see, there's a lot of to put it bluntly, these stupid crap on television now. They're not very good stories. There are some good stories. I see The Flash is one of my favorite cartoons out right now, but not really a lot of stories about like good people doing good things. I don't know. I think so. I think it is pretty important that there's a more positive representation of men and boys. Not necessarily because people are going to expect that this is how men and boys are, because that would be kind of stupid if you did. But I think it'll kind of boost the morale of people watching this stuff. I think it's more like a morale booster for me. The graduate. Well, what are your thoughts on that? Though? I mean, just before I move on.
Well, the thing is that men and boys in popular culture, especially in media, are being typecast in very specific roles. I mean, I had a conversation with someone that I mentor in writing, and I told her that the reason why we see more white men in movies is because we can do more bad things to white men than we can do to any other group. If I write a character, because I'm a writer, if I write a character that's black that has a negative trait, I'm racist. If I have a female and I give her a negative trait, I'm sexist. If I have a gay person, I'm just a bigot of the LGBT. But if I do it to a white person, no problem whatsoever. But even in that, it's like men as a whole, we're seeing being put into a smaller and smaller role that they only have negative traits about them, where females are allowed to be strong. And to suggest that a male is able to be strong is the worst thing that we can say about men. Men are not
You know,
allowed to be strong.
Yeah, and one interesting thing I've noticed here, and which will also be part of what the video I'm thinking about making, is how female characters are only strong when they're masculine. If you notice a lot, even in video games, a lot of so-called, quote unquote, strong female characters are just men with vaginas. I mean, if you put a man in that same place, it isn't like a feminine struggle she has to deal with. She's more, fighting against wars and kingdoms and all that, which is something that men did. And even though it's true that there were female warriors back in the past, I mean, for the most, they weren't the majority. So again, with a lot of the shows and a lot of the media, it's only, you're right, I agree. It is only acceptable if we see strong female characters, but feminists will have a field day, complaining about strong male characters or anything like that. And and it seems that we only accept male characters when they become subservient to women. And so it's not all, it's not a lot, but I have noticed that it happens every now and again that we won't even let men be the leaders, and if that does happen, or if a woman becomes subservient to them, then all of a sudden that's sexist and that's bad. And personally, I think we should let our stories be fucking stories. Let the author tell the story he wants to tell. Like for example, like in King of Thrones, you had Sansa or Samson, one of the others. She was raped, but throughout the course of the show, there are lots of men who get tortured and like get their balls cut off, and no one has a problem with that. you know. And so I mean, it's only cool if we have these strong female characters, but if something bad happens to them, that's bad. But God forbid, you know, like a man gets his testicles cut off, and that's all right. So I'm with you on that one. You have a point there in
Well,
terms of
it's like
representation.
the issue in video games that, you know, Anita Sarkeesian's talking about all these bad things that happen to female characters in video games and how they're just objects to be manipulated. And it's like, yeah, but if you look at it, 99% of all characters that are killed in video games, and not just main characters, but NPCs, are male. And
Sure.
that you know, men are the ones that are most likely to die in any scenario. And if a woman is happened to be killed, that's the most sexist thing you can do. Men are
Yeah.
basically treated as cannon fodder in our society. It's because they're expendable. They're expected to go off and fight in a war and die. And if they don't die, they come back and we treat them like shit. Because, oh, well, you're an American hero, but we're going to take away all your other rights and treat you like complete shit. And that's what happens in our society. And when it comes to looking at video game characters, the same pretty much happens that, oh, a male just died. Who gives a shit? Oh, a female skinned her knee. Let's stop the entire narrative and focus on that. And feminists are complaining. It's like, well, she just has tits, so that's why the story is doing that. And it's like, did you ignore all the 100 guys I just killed to get to that point?
And one of the most ironic things is even the main character. I mean, if you're playing any video game, you've probably been killed like over 100 times just playing the game itself. You know, so you have to think about the main characters being killed continuously. Like this is an old game. I think. I think it was not Dragon Quest, but it was like some night game where you have to hit the button at the right place at the right time, otherwise you die. And pretty much the whole game is this guy getting killed over and over again. You know, no one has a problem with that. You know, but God forbid you have a female character and something bad happens to her, and that's the terrible thing. And I'd say no, just let the game be the game. I mean, it is what it is.
Okay, so looking also at the graduation rate of men, what are your thoughts on that? Because, you know, I'll put this out there that there is also a issue with minority men being most likely to be expelled from school. And that's also an issue that's not really being addressed. Men by themselves, but minority men.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right. I think that is a very important issue. Excuse me, that needs to be addressed and talked about, and we really need to figure out what's going on with these young men in order to really find a way to combat it. You know, so until I think more information needs to go into what is making these men drop out and what's happening in these different schools. That's makes it a consistent thing all over America that we're seeing so many young men not being able to complete high school. So, but I'm glad some people think it is important, but I think more information needs to be delved into so we can figure it out and make some solutions.
Well, there has been some study done into this. There's a school right now, and I think it's in Indiana. It's an all male school. And they're doing studies on how boys are handling this environment. And there is actually some suggestion that segregating the classes as far as gender might actually be a good thing. That, you know, boys can be in an environment where they can get the proper tools they need to learn, because boys and girls learn in different ways. However, the education system is more geared towards girls than it is to boys. And they are noticing that boys are more likely to graduate from this schooling versus any other. They're above the national average.
All right. Yeah, man, that makes sense.
And then also, what are your thoughts on the ADD issue?
Um, I have really trouble understanding how they diagnose ADD. And I think that's one very important thing that should be looked into. Because to be fair, some of the boys could have ADD, but if it's like a huge margin of them, I think you're right. I think some of them are being misdiagnosed. I think they might be correct on some cases because there's just such a big sample size of young boys, but I don't think it can be as many that. What's what I'm looking for? I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. That's what I'm saying. So I do think we need to figure out what are the symptoms and how are they diagnosing these children. And we need to understand how boys are. You know, young boys do like running around, and it isn't wrong. But if it's too much, maybe he might have ADD. So I can't say completely that to just track it all out because there could be some cases of ADD, but it probably is not as extreme as a lot of the people are making it out to be.
And that's perfectly reasonable. Yeah, there probably are a few people who are being diagnosed that are actually have ADD or ADHD. But then again, there are a lot of people, a lot of boys that are getting diagnosed that really aren't. They're just being boys. It's being used as a means to control behavior. And that's a very dangerous thing because we should only be using drugs for the people that need it and not be using it as just a way to control a population. So let's go to our last two. These kind of went into the others, and then we'll do the lightning round of the female issues just real quick. The first one, we'll do these individually since they don't really relate to anything else. But the first one is, how important is banning of infant circumcision to you? 44% said that this was very important. 20% said that this was somewhat important, and 15% were kind of in the middle about it.
I'm not gonna lie. Well, when I first started making videos, I really didn't think too much about circumcision because personally, I don't really think my life would be too different if I wasn't circumcised or if I was. I mean, I didn't think it made a difference. But after spending some time listening to people talk about it, especially Katie Chaos, yeah, I don't really think that you should, circumcise your child unless the man later in his life wants it to happen. Particularly because if it's that painful to a little baby, you really shouldn't subject them to it. One thing that kind of scares me a little bit is have you ever heard of the case of David Raymer? You know what happened with him?
The little boy in Florida.
No, no. I don't think he lived in Florida, but basically during circumcision, his penis was destroyed. It got they snipped off too much, and they tried to do some gender reassignment and try to make him out to be a girl, and ultimately ended up committing suicide. But
Yeah.
the point I'm making is that some circumcision you can snip off too much, and you can really hurt a child. So at this point, I'm like, nah, I don't think the baby should be circumcised. I
The
think it should
case
be a choice when they're older.
the case that I was thinking of is something that's going on right now, and I believe it is in Florida right now, where a mother is fighting with the court system because the father of the child wants to get a circumcision for their child, which I believe is 3 years old, and the mother is fighting against it. She doesn't want the child to get a circumcision. And she has so far lost in the court system and is now required to get a circumcision for the boy.
Yeah, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's a fair thing. Especially, I mean, because the kid doesn't know what's happening, and there's no real way to know how your life is going to be different unless you are uncircumcised and then you change and become circumcised, and then after that, it is what it is. But I don't think it's fair, that we take that decision out of these young men's hand and say, yeah, you're gonna have to, get circumcised for X Y reason. I don't think it's right.
And a lot of what I hear from feminists about, why circumcision is necessary. I mean, there's the whole, well, it helps reduce the chance of getting an STD. And I'm like, you know what else does that? A condom.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
also the thing that I hear is, well, men can get like an infection if they're uncircumcised. And I'm like, so that's your reasoning
oh,
that
shit.
one in 1,000 boys can get possibly an infection, and that's the reason to do it, because 1 in 8 women in their lifetimes will get breast cancer. And based on your reasoning, should we just chop off girls' breasts to prevent them from getting breast cancer?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and even that being said, it's still the argument because if you just wash the foreskin, you should be all right. You know, you'd only get like an infection if you're not taking care of your body. So it's a weak argument to put it bluntly.
Yeah, and there are also cases. Zap is talking about all those who die from circumcision. There are cases where, because in the Jewish faith, in some sects of it, not only is a boy cut, but then also the rabbi will suck some of the blood out. But there have been cases reported where the rabbi had like some sort of STD. I think it was hepatitis, and when he sucked the blood out, the child ended up getting hepatitis and died.
Yeah, that's just one disgusting, and I don't know. It kind of strengthens my position. I don't think should take that decision away from the young man. I think it should be his. I mean, he's the one who's going to have to live with it. So I don't really understand why you put that decision in someone else's hands.
And then our last one before we get into the lightning round is, how important is eradicating the male gender roles to you? 44% said it was very important, 20% somewhat important, 14% were kind of eh. What are your thoughts on that?
Personally, here's my thing. I don't mind male gender roles, but females would have to have gender roles too. Either I think this might be the one issue for feminists that has to be a zero sum game. Either you say women can do whatever they want, men can do whatever they want too, or men have gender roles and women have to have gender roles too. So there has to be some consensus there, and it has to create balance. And what I've noticed with a lot of people in general in our society is we'll let women do whatever they want to do, but God forbid men don't follow their gender roles. If men aren't the protectors and providers, women do not want to date those men. Um, you might find some cases of women, letting guys be stay-at-home dads. You might find some women, but they're like the minority. You'll find probably like 3% of women. I mean, I just made it up, but the point is, you're not going to find a lot of women who are going to let men not be the protectors and the providers. Most women do want to be with men who make more money than them. Most women want to be with men who are bigger and stronger than them. Most women want to be with these dominant men. That's what they want. They want these traditional men, and yet they don't want to be traditional women. So my gripe here is you have to make up your mind across the board. Either you're going to let us all be whatever we want to be, or you're going to have men be traditional men and women be traditional women. It's one or the other. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and that's pretty much my thought as well. I mean, we're feminists are always talking about how the world just wants women to be in traditional gender roles, and it's like, traditional gender roles would be that you're not allowed to leave the home, that you have to stay home and raise a child, and you're not allowed to get an education. And women have the choice on whether they want to do that or they want to do all the things that traditionally they were not allowed to do. But men are still expected to earn all the money, to sacrifice everything for their family, and then be told, well, because you make more money than a woman, you have more power, which most of his power is spent doing overtime at work and then giving a large percentage of his money to his family so his family can be well off. Where a woman can get the choice to work part time and take care of her family while also doing a job. Men do not really get this option. So I think we do need to eradicate male gender roles and allow everyone to have the choice of what they want to do rather than just expecting men to take on these roles just so women can have a choice.
Yeah, I clearly agree.
All right, so we're going to move into our lightning round because it's short and we've making really good time on this video. So I'm just going to read these off real quick and then see if you want to add a comment to it. And we'll just kind of go through these really quick. And if you don't, just let me know if you don't really have an opinion on it. Now, these are issues that affect predominantly women. The first being, how important is access to abortion services to you? Not necessarily whether you agree with abortion, but how important is it that women have access to these things? 73% stated that they feel it's very important, 13% somewhat important. What are your thoughts on that, Z?
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, I guess it's kind of funny. I don't really think that is an issue that only affects women. But I guess predominantly so fine. Personally, I think you should only be able to get an abortion if your life is threatened. So as far as accessibility to that, I think is important. But out of convenience sake, I don't really think anyone should get an abortion just because they don't want to have children. That's me personally. So I do think access is important, but only like in life-threatening situations. So
One of the
I,
issues
I, I
one
go
of
ahead.
the issues going on with this is that there are states that are trying to limit access to abortion services, even though the law says that a woman is allowed to get an abortion. And for me, when I just read this question, it's not so much about whether my opinion is that a woman deserves an abortion or not, or should get one, but rather what the law states and what lawmakers in various states are trying to do to prevent it. If the law allows a woman to get an abortion, then she should be able to get one without trying to close down all of these centers and trying to say, well, you can get one, but you have to travel 500 miles to get one. No, the law is what it is, and we
Yeah,
can't just start, tiptoeing around the law just because we don't agree with the law.
yeah. So yeah, you're right. So on that point, if this says you can do it, then I don't think people should try to follow that decision. So I do agree with you on there. If it is legal in the state, then I mean then it should be legal. That's what the people voted for.
Okay, so let's go to our next one. How important is women's health care to you? 72% say it's very important, 15% say somewhat important. Where are you on this?
Um, I don't know. I really don't care. I think health. I mean, listen, isn't healthcare for everyone? Shouldn't everyone try to get healthcare or anything like that?
Yeah,
So
very much so. But the first set of questions were for predominantly men. This is for predominantly women. So,
yeah, I don't know. I don't really care honestly.
so we'll just go with everyone deserves health care in your opinion. Is that a
Yeah,
fair assessment?
yeah. I mean, yeah. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay. So yeah, I mean these are hard questions because it's like you're not really aware that there really is an issue, but how important is
Yeah.
teen pregnancy prevention to you? 71% say it's very important, 18% say somewhat important.
Well, I don't know. Are we talking about abstinence or are we talking about sex education? Because sex education doesn't seem to be preventing people from having sex. So, um,
Well,
I don't
the
know.
sex education
I don't.
program is severely limited in that they're not allowed to talk about condoms because when you say to a child, you can wear a condom, it encourages children to have sex. So don't talk about that. But then we'll talk about things like you shouldn't have sex until you get married. And no one's going to take that seriously. We should be
Well,
a little
see,
bit more serious about, children are going to have sex. We can try to encourage them not to, but let's teach them the safe way to do it.
yeah. Well, and that's the interesting thing about that because when I was growing up, I don't know who's teaching them these abstinence only programs. I don't know what states are there, but here in Florida, I was taught pretty much everything. I was taught how sperm works, how egg cells work. You got to wear a condom. I was taught about STDs. I was taught about everything. So I was looking at this from people in my generation. Well, I mean, I can't say people in my generation, but people in my class. We were taught all these different things. We were taught about condoms and birth control and all that. So I've always known about this since I was like 13 years old, which is why I always find it strange when people say that they've only been taught abstinence only programs and they've only been taught that. I didn't know. I don't know how true that is. I guess it is true. I don't know.
It's
But
very true, honestly. There are
yeah,
parent groups, especially in California, that are like, you can't teach our children these things. It's a parent's responsibility, and we choose not to teach them anything at all. Because the belief is
yeah,
that
that,
if you
that
teach
would
them
be,
about
that's yeah,
sex, you're going to encourage them to do it.
yeah, that's foolishness. You shouldn't say the school system shouldn't teach you. I'll teach you, but then not teach them. You know, And the thing is, I've never had sex before, and I was taught all of this stuff. But I guess I'm different, so because I'm a special guy. But the fact remains, I think, I think you should teach them biology. Teach them how things works. You're not going to encourage them to have sex when you teach them. You might actually discourage them to have sex if you teach them, hey, that white sticky stuff is going to get a woman pregnant. So, if you're saying that it's important that we teach kids what sex is, biology pretty much, then yeah, that's a very important issue. Um, I guess the thing about pregnancy is it still really isn't something that only affects women. Well, again, predominantly, so yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think it is important. I think teen pregnancy is a very important thing that should be dealt with, and that you should teach kids, how the human body works. And that won't necessarily encourage them or discourage them, but they'll have the knowledge to choose.
Okay, so the next one is how important are body image campaigns for girls to you? This one's a little bit all over the place, but 39% said very important, 26 somewhat important, 15% kind of in the middle. Me personally, I think that there's kind of like this oversensitivity to girl body campaign. Like, oh, well, you're beautiful the way you are, but let's show you a picture of a woman getting photoshopped to be even more beautiful than she actually is, like the Dove commercials. And I think that even these body image campaigns are sending the wrong messages to girls of saying, well, everyone can be beautiful, but we're only going to show these people to be more beautiful than you.
Yeah, I personally, I don't think that I don't really think that it is really important. And here's why. The way I've noticed a lot of women kind of view the world around them is they'll see images and they expect themselves to become just like that. A lot of women internalize this stuff a lot more than men do. And that's why they even make these campaigns, because they understand that's how girls think, and now they're going to internalize them. But I think it's more important to teach them, how to be comfortable with themselves and understand what the purpose of sexual attraction is. Because if you're telling them, you got to be pretty or it doesn't matter, well, that's not really true. It does matter to some people. Some people are going to be attracted to you, some people aren't, and there isn't anything wrong with that. And instead of teaching them you're beautiful the way you are, you got to teach them, hey, some people are going to be attracted to you, some people aren't. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you feed them the lie that they're beautiful to everybody, well, that's just not true. Not everyone's going to find them attractive, and you shouldn't feed them any type of information that's going to lead them astray and make them think that they're fine when they're not. Some women are pretty just the way they are. Some women are all right, and some people, and the thing that I think is all right, some people are going to think is gorgeous. So, as far as you say, I think the focus should be comfortable with yourself, and you'll find some man who wants to be with you. I think that should be the focus. Because that's the purpose of looking good anyway. Even if there are perks to being attractive, the point of being attractive is to broadcast fertility for women. So it shouldn't even be thought of as something super important because of that fact that it's just there to broadcast fertility. You got any thoughts on that?
Honestly, these campaigns, I think, do more harm than good because it gives people a false sense of entitlement that it's like, well, you're beautiful the way you are. And there's truth in that, but the way they go about doing it is saying that if someone doesn't find you attractive, then there's something wrong with them and that you're just 100% perfect the way you are no matter what you look like. And it focuses things in the wrong direction. First off, it puts, there's this whole fat shaming campaign where men are told that they're not allowed to have a personal preference when it comes to women and their looks, that they should like every single woman. But then the flip side is I keep saying that a lot, but women are allowed to be choosy on what kind of men they're attracted to. And in fact, in many of those little cartoons that are drawn about, all women are beautiful, and you see these like really fat girls, they're always with a skinny guy. And in fact, it's kind of looked down upon that a man be fat in any way. But if you think that a woman who is fat is unattractive, then there's something wrong with you. And that's what these body image campaigns are doing, is saying that everyone else has the problem, but you are perfect the way you are, rather than properly prepare them that, you know what, you are fine the way you are, but you need to understand that not everyone is going to see you that way, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Precisely. Yeah. Exactly right.
So honestly, I think these body image campaigns do more harm than good. But let's go on to our next one. How important is women entering predominantly male fields to you? 35% say this is very important, 28% somewhat important, 15% in the middle.
I don't think it is very important at all. And the reason why is because women should be able to do what they want to do. If women want to be in that field, and they gotta understand, the consequences. And consequences has a negative connotation, but I don't really mean that. Guarantee something bad's gonna happen to you, but guarantee you might not like it, or you might not like the way men interact with other men. I mean, but if that's what you want to do, you gotta pick your balls up and do it. Same thing. I don't really think it should be a big issue if women want to do what, go into a field that has mostly men. Like if a woman wants to be a garbage truck collector, then let her collect garbage. That's what she wants to do. If she can do the job well, I think let her actions speak for itself. I think it's more important that she has merit than the fact that she's a woman. And as a woman, she needs to understand that she's going into a field with mostly men, and men aren't women, so they're gonna, treat her a little differently, or they're gonna react to each other differently. And she should understand that if she wants to go into a field with mostly men. Those are my thoughts.
I actually agree with you. I don't think this is really an issue. Women being able to enter any field they want to, fine, have at it. But be aware that we're not going to give you special treatment just because you happen to have a vagina.
Exactly.
You want to get into a field, you're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to prove yourself that you can do the job, that it should be based on your skill alone, what you can bring to the table. And then a lot of feminists are like, well, yeah, but she's going to be judged for being a woman. She's not going to be giving any fair shot. And it's like, you know what? A lot of men are not given a fair shot when in a field. They might be perfectly capable of doing it, and someone else gets the position. Where's the outcry for that? That a lot of qualified people end up not getting jobs because they don't scratch the right backs or they don't kiss up, and this happens regularly. But no one gives a shit about that. Well, you know what? What's right for one is right for the other. And if men have a hard time in the field, then women are going to have a hard time in the field. And just because she might be the only woman there doesn't mean it's sexist. It means that she's being treated like a man.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you want to do. So, I mean, if that's what you want, then she's got to accept the consequences or the reaction that she's going to get. And so...
But oftentimes, I mean, Mercedes talks about, her experience being in the STEM field. And she said that, because of her gender, she got opportunities faster than men did because she was like, oh, well, this is a woman. We should give her special attention. She's also a minority. So she was given a lot more privileges because it was viewed that she doesn't have any. And that she got to go to the head of the class, metaphorically speaking, in her career because she was a minority woman. Even though she had the skills, she's very smart, she was given more opportunities because of her gender, which is wrong by itself. No one should be given any... we shouldn't be seeing affirmative action as far as gender goes. I'm still not really sure as far as race goes. That's a discussion for another day. But as far as gender goes, no. If a person enters into a field, then it's their performance, it is their experience, and it is their skills that should be judged, not what's between their legs.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, who's Mercedes, by the way?
Mercedes Carrera?
Who's that?
She's a porn star. Really big within Gamergate, but she also discusses issues of veterans as well as men's rights.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't remember off the top of my head. Okay, I got you.
Oh yeah, she's an awesome woman. Okay, so how important is the underdiagnosis of girls with ADD? Now we discussed boys with ADD. Girls who are actually sufferers of ADD tend not to be diagnosed. 35% find that this is very important issue, 27% somewhat important, 18% in the middle.
Yeah, I don't know. Uh, well, I don't know if they are being underdiagnosed or not. I really don't know about girls and ADD. I haven't thought about that issue.
That's
I
fair.
don't really have it.
There's nothing I can really comment on this either, other than the fact that if this is happening, then we need to pay more attention to it, especially since boys are being thrown medication almost at like a faster rate than girls when it comes to ADD. Not a faster rate, but more often than girls. So we need to fix this whole issue with ADD as a whole. But let's go ahead and get to the next one. A couple more left. How important is the sexualization of women in the media to you? This one was kind of all over the place, but 24% say not at all important. 23% said very important. Another 23% said somewhat important. And then 15% said not at all important. And another 15, eh.
Yeah, me, I don't mind it. um, I don't know. I don't really think it matters if you show a bunch of sexualized women like, and I think I was primarily thinking more of ads. So I mean, if we were starting with advertisements, again, it doesn't matter because I'm an adult and I can decide if I want the product or not. Um, as far as like maybe like in movies and TV shows, I mean, if it makes sense in the narrative, then let it be. You should care more about the story and the characters anyway. Like with Game of Thrones, I mean, it doesn't really bother too many people that they're making women. They care more about the story, so who cares? I think people should look at it like that. If it's gratuitous, if it's way too much, I guess kind of the same thing with men. If it's way too much, then maybe that can be for concern. But again, overall, the story should matter more. And if it's an ad, I mean, you're an adult. You can choose if you want the product or not.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. We live our lives wanting sex. So why don't we want to see sex, in the things that we watch? Yeah, we're not necessarily seeing like ugly people naked anywhere, but we wouldn't want to watch that anyways. We would want to see, what would be considered the most attractive when we're watching our TV, whether it's in advertisements, movies, TVs, what have you. We want to see beautiful people on there because no one's going to pay to see someone who's not so beautiful on there. So this really isn't an issue. Feminists make this an issue mostly just to have something to complain about.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, specifically because it happens to both men and women. It's not something that only happens to women, and yet they make it seem like it is. So I agree.
Okay, and the last one that we're going to talk about today, not really much to be said on this, but how important is the state of the modeling industry to you? A little bit all over the place for this one as well. 29% said not important at all. 20% very important. 20% somewhat important. 17% eh.
So the very interesting thing about modeling is female models actually get paid a lot more than male models. I mean, there's a huge gap between the amount of money you can make being a male in the modeling industry and being a female. And I've never heard a feminist ever once talk about that. Not one time. Talk about pay inequality of male models to female models. Even in the porn industry, women get paid a lot more money than men get paid. So I mean, there's that aspect of it all. I don't really think it's all that important to me personally, but as a talking point, I think there's a lot of things to be discussed. Even when it talks about, I guess you would include plus size models, or fat models into this scenario too. I think it's very interesting how now we're seeing a pendulum change where we're seeing more these bigger women, these more average looking women are being shoved down throats is beautiful, and if you don't accept them, it's kind of earlier to what you said about body images. You know, if you don't accept these plus size models, you don't accept these bigger women as attractive, you're a bad person. And I'm like, well, nah. I mean, if some people find it attractive, which some do, and I mean that's their cup of tea. Let them buy the pictures or whatever. But if they don't, it shouldn't be shoved down your face is beautiful. And if you become a model, you kind of got to accept the but me personally, you know, I don't intend on being a model. Um, I, you know, it doesn't really bother me, but I think as a talking point, you know, more people should discuss the fact that there's certainly pay inequality here in the modeling industry, and no one talks about it. You know, you only get a couple of male porn stars who will say, "Hey, I mean, you know, look, I work out too. You know, I look good, and I only get paid a fraction of what she gets." You know, so
Yeah, and that's the hidden truth about all of that is we live in a culture that's always about protecting women at all costs, but yet, you know, when we look at the men in, you know, modeling, in dance, in porn, in any performance art short of acting, women tend to get paid a lot more because people want to see women performing. And you know, we
yeah,
talked about this pay equality. Well, you know for a fact that, you know, when it comes to figuring out, you know, the pay gap, that things like, you know, dancing and modeling and porn is probably not figured into that at all. And I bet you anything, if it was, you know, that gap would be about even because of the way it's measured. But
yeah.
you
Well,
know, as far as, you know, I actually put a lot of attention into the porn industry and about the crap that they have to go through. I recently did the latex challenge, where I wore latex gloves for 8 hours straight, which was not fun, by the way. But the point of doing that was is because that there's legislation being brought against the porn industry of saying that they have to wear condoms when they have sex on camera, which is a bad idea as the gloves represent, because it's not fun wearing a condom any longer than you have to. And in fact, the safety standard by the porn industry is much higher than any other career field in the world. More than that, they have had less outbreaks of AIDS than any other career out there, except those that involve employing children, which I can't think of any at the moment. But, you know, they are very, very safe. So this idea of having to wear condoms is really just to try to say, we don't want you doing what you're doing. We're going to try to force you to quit. And that's the only issue that I really take with it. But as far as there being a gender inequality issue, other than pay, there really is no issue to be concerned with. So I'm kind of in the camp that I'm not really all that concerned about the modeling industry.
yeah, I think that's reasonable. I can understand that. You know, even I, you know, again, I mean, it is what it is.
All right, so that does it for our video today. Now, there is another section about general issues. I'm actually not going to go over this, as you can see some of the questions going by, because these are just general issues. They're not really talking about anything to do with gender equality. So for my next video, I'm going to be going down to, and yeah, there's like a major chunk of this, women who are not feminist. And I'll be going over this issue. I don't know who I'll have, if I'll be doing it by myself, but this will be a very good issue to do. I thank you, Zarius, for coming out tonight or today. Is there any way people can find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, BASSFZz. You
Can
know,
you say that again? You got cut off.
huh?
Can you say that again? You got cut off.
So you can find me on YouTube at BASSFZz, and you can find me on Twitter at the same handle. So yeah, you can find me. I'm all over the place.
Yeah, he does really good videos for anyone who has not checked him out yet. I do love his talks about Lacey Green, or as he says, his arch nemesis.
Yeah, my greatest adversary. Yeah.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, he does do a lot of things on men's rights from his unique perspective, but he does a lot of other things as well. So it's always entertaining. I mean, he's just a very funny guy, but he knows how to get to the heart of the matter. So I have a lot of respect for him. And I thank you for coming out today. As I said at the
No, no
beginning, it's a great honor to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate that.
All right. So that does it for me today. Thank you for everyone who's come out. Share this with all your followers. And this is Mad Cat signing off.